Hello, YouTube fam. Thanks for watching Around the Shabbos Table. And just to let you know that the video did not come out this week. Just trying to figure out this video thing, and hopefully we'll be back. So I'm going to post just the audio this week, and I hope to be back with video next week. Welcome back, my fellow friends, to another episode of Think Torah. This is Around the Shabbos Table. Around the Shabbos Table on Think Torah is a project of the Intentional Jew Podcast Network. You can go check them out on intentionaljew.com. Check out other shows and other podcasts. Some really great, thoughtful stuff there. I want to say thank you to you, to our listeners. You guys rock. And we've asked for some feedback, and we got our feedback. And we're really happy to have that. It energizes us to see and to know that we're getting this feedback back from you. Few important ones about some of our previous episodes: the Iker Tuffle, the priorities issue that we spoke about, got some nice feedback, and this last Vart sort of that was stuck in the middle of the last podcast, episode 6. If you haven't heard it, you can go back and listen, about Ein Kelokenu and then Mi Kelokenu, and the structure of Ein to Me. We got some nice feedback and some nice conversation around that as well. And just to reiterate here that the point and the reason why we call this Around the Shabbos Table is not that we're sitting at a Shabbos table, but we're giving you conversation and ammo, if you will, for your Shabbos table. We believe if you sit down and start and say, does anybody have questions? What's the proper, or you start off your Shabbos table with, what's the proper approach to asking questions on God and asking questions on Judaism? And somebody says, oh, you should do it like this, or you should do it like that. And you say, oh, well, I heard of art, and you can say it. It's a different way of presenting the Vart, and it could really change your Shabbos table when it's conversation, when your wife is involved, when your children are involved, if you're a child, if you're a teenager, when your parents are involved. People like to be involved in a Vart and not be told a Vart to or at. And that's what we're trying to accomplish here, is give you the ammo that you need to do that. So
we would love if our listeners had any issues, any suggestions of things that they would love to hear discussed by us. What we discuss is not the definitive answer to anything, but
this is totally unscripted. This is totally unscripted,
completely unscripted, and it's two Jews' opinion of an issue, and and there could be righter opinions, there could be wronger opinions. There could be better ways to answer or worse ways to answer, but this is our way of answering. And sometimes it's good to hear somebody else's perspective on something so that it helps you to continue to shape your own, or to know what you want to stay away from, and to know how to formulate an answer if somebody who you're engaged in a conversation with takes it in that direction. So we would really love ultimately to get this thing to a place where our listeners were interested enough to share that with us. Say, well, why don't you speak about this issue? I'd love to hear something about that issue. And if those are issues that we feel that we can tackle, then we would love to do that.
So the technical side of that is that you can reach out to us. And if it's something more personal, reach out to us at intentionaljew@gmail.com. Easiest way. You will reach both myself and Rabbi Wohlgelernter that way to be able to talk to us. We hope you deeply enjoy today's episode of Around the Shabbos Table.
I just want to bring up something, Ahron, if I may. I want to bring up something that I think made a big impression on me as we finished the Book of Bereishis, which, by the way, that in itself could be a podcast on itself. Look at how time is flying. We just started Sefer Bereishis. Granted, I mean, I've had a bidud and many grandchildren in that span.
That's a great point.
At the end of the day, it was just yesterday. It just feels like it's mamish, like it's flying. Now conversations are going to change from talking about Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov and the Avos, and we're now going to be talking about Bnei Yisrael, and we're going to be talking about Geula, and we're going to be talking about Golas. I mean, the whole tone of conversation through the Pasha is going to change. And by the way, I think that's why we say that the year, when you look at your year, you remember certain events based on the Pasha or the time of year, because the conversation of the year is very much directed by what's going on in the Pasha, and therefore the things that are on your mind based on what the Pasha is. And you're looking for connections between certain Pashos and Purim and certain Pashos and Pesach.
Also, can you source? I remember hearing that when I was younger, that the Parsha itself, even though the splits of the Parsha were not necessarily a tradition, a Jewish tradition, right? But yet there's something to do with that Parsha is mashpia and affects that week. It's like connected on a deep level. Is that sourced anywhere, or is it just that?
I'm not familiar with the source, but I have heard it many, many times.
Right, I definitely feel that way. This week was a Yosef week. This week was a Yehuda week. And you feel that this week was an Avdus week. There's
there's certain midos that we connect to again, and I think that on a non-mystical level, I think that it's because the conversation in the parshas that if you're connected to the parsha, if you're learning the parsha, you go to shul during the week and you hear the beginning of the parsha, your head is already getting into it. If you have any connection to trying to prepare something in the parsha, right? The deeper your connection to the parsha is, so then the deeper that effect is on you, because these are the issues they're open inside of you. This is what your head is in. So I'll tell you where my head was a little bit this week.
Now, although you're listening to this after we read Parshas Vayechi,
this is the reason why I'm not reluctant to bring this up, even though it is not really Parsha based in the sense that our podcasts are not Parsha based, but I'm not reluctant to bring this up because this brings up such an incredibly global issue that if you wanted to write a sefer about this issue as it relates to the Parsha, you can find a connection to every single Parsha to this issue. There are people that wrote Sfarim like that. There are people that write, on the love of Eretz Yisrael, and they'll find that in every single Parsha.
Right.
The people that write about Avos Yisrael, right? You have Yisrael, you write about Avos Yisrael, and you'll see that in every single Parsha. So I'll leave the issue really to the end, but it'll start to crystallize in a minute. Now, I'm going to do this as quickly as possible. But there's an incredible thing that happens. He tells his kids to make sure I don't take brain in Mitzrayim. He tells Yosef, I don't want to be married in Egypt. And that in itself, by the way, is its own podcast, is assimilation. And that how do you, why did Yaakov Avinu want to make sure that he wasn't buried in Mitzrayim? He wanted to make sure he wasn't buried in Mitzrayim, not so much because of himself, but he wanted to make sure that he wasn't buried in Mitzrayim because he knew that would be devastating for his children. Because his children would get stuck there. Kavarovas was there. They would get stuck, and they would tend to think that this is their primary place, not Eretz Yisrael. And he wanted the focus not to change. Now, I once heard a beautiful Maisa. I'm afraid I'm going to get off track, but I once heard a beautiful Maisa of a certain Gevir in America, a very wealthy person who had somebody working with him taking care of his money. And he told to the guy that he wants him to buy him a plot to be buried in Eretz Yisrael, and he wants it on Har HaZeisim. And he wants it with a view of the Temple Mount. So his money handler thought it was a little weird. Rooms with a view are only good in the middle of Modi'in, but a room with a view after you've died, that's not really going to help you much. But he did what he wanted him to do. He went to Har HaZeisim. He found a plot, but he couldn't find a plot no longer with a view of the Temple Mount. So he got one around the side, no view. Went back to his boss, and he said to him, I got you the plot, but I just want you to know I couldn't get the view also. So he got very upset with him. So he said to him, what are you upset about? You're not going to be sitting there, sightseeing all day. Like, why do you need a view? He said, fool, the view wasn't for me. My kids aren't frum. The view was for my children. Then when they come to my kever, and they stand there with me, when they turn around, I want them to see the Makom HaMikdash. Because maybe one day when they turn around, something will strike them as they look to the Makom HaMikdash, and they'll remember who they are, and it'll change their lives. I think that was what Yaakov Avinu's thrust was. Al Notik Bereini b'Mitzrayim. Granted, he didn't want to be buried in Mitzrayim, but he could have gotten over that if there was a good reason for him to be buried in Mitzrayim. But instead, he wanted to make sure that he was buried in Eretz Yisrael, not only for himself, but because he was worried about his children. That wasn't my point, but that's a magnificent. It's just a magnificent idea. Then Yaakov Avinu says to Yosef, he says to him that he tells him a little story before he's going to give a bracha to his kids, and he says that Vani beboi mipadan, right when I came from Padan Aram, and your mom died, and I buried her on the road, and I didn't bury her in Ma'aras Machpelah. And how do Kimat all the commentaries explain that he was saying to Yosef, don't do as I do as I say. I'm asking you to bury me in Ma'aras Machpelah. I didn't do that for your mom.
Oh, fascinating.
And I feel guilty that I didn't do it for your mom. I'm not sure that was in Yaakov's repertoire. I'm not sure that Yaakov knew that where he buried Rachel was where Rachel needed to be buried, where he buried Leah was where Leah needed to be buried, and he wasn't apologizing for anything, nor was he worried. I think that he was going to make them swear. So what's he worried about? Even if they were mad at him, they were ticked off at him that he didn't bury their mom in the Yosef's
right.
Didn't bury his mom. But a swear is a swear. He doesn't have to worry. So why did he need to admit? It also gets in the way of the narrative. What's happening is about to bless his children. What do you need to get into this story for? So if you look at something I think really fascinating in Sefer Shmos, in Sefer Bereishis, is that you see that look at what Rachel and Leah, look at their lives and look at what they had. Rachel had Yaakov's love. What did she yearn? Yaakov's kids. Leah had Yaakov's kids. What did she yearn? She yearned Yaakov's love. And that comes out in the whole story of the Dudoyim. That she's got the Dudoyim was some kind of symbol of love and symbol of affection, and the one wanted it from the other and was willing to trade the night with Yaakov. So she was willing to trade the love for the children.
The children.
But that wasn't just a conversation between the two of them. There was, because each one of them that night gave up what they have to get what they hoped for. If it was that strong, it could not have been just an emotion that the two of them lived with. And I think that when we see Yosef going to tell over Dibara about the way that the children of Leah were dealing with the children of Zilpah and Bilhah, I think they were what Yosef was really confused about and found difficult was that there was a rift between Leah and Rachel manifesting itself in the children. That the reason that there was this difficulty in the children, because the children were only playing out what was going on with the moms. Now, the moms weren't beating each other in the street, but there was a tension. And that tension, before they threw Yosef into a pit, that tension existed between the children of Leah, of Zilpah, and of Rachel, and of Leah. Excuse me.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, it's not a direct, consistent kind of rift, because it was between Rachel and Leah was the tension, and then this tension wasn't really the sons of Rachel.
No, they were having a difficulty with each other before Yosef. That's what Yosef was bringing to his father when he went to his father to tell him Dibara about his brothers. And one of the things he said was that they're treating the children of the maidservants in a disparaging kind of way. What was it about? What were they treating them in a disparaging kind of way? These were wives of Yaakov. They were treating them in a disparaging way because I think that it was more about, and again I'm inventing, but I think that it was more about Bilhah's children and Leah's children than it was about Leah and Zilpah's children.
Interesting.
And that's what Yosef was smelling. That's what. And when did that end? When the brothers defended a son of Rachel. When that rift was over. That was the end of the whole story. That the whole thing came to fruition there. What Yosef was doing, why he didn't reveal himself, and it was only at the end when that whole thing that whole thing came to fruition, that Yosef now realized that the rift that existed between the brothers, that was history. It was done. And now it was time to bring all that together, and that's why he revealed himself. With that reconciliation of the brothers, that moment that they were able to get together, so that struggle between Rachel and Leah comes to a close. Now, her whole life, Leah was yearning for love, Rachel was yearning for kids, and that's what they got. Rachel is Ima Shel Klal Yisrael. It's Mama Rachel. Leah rests for eternity with Yaakov Avinu in Ma'aras Machpelah. Ultimately, posthumously, she got the love she was looking for, and she got the children that she was looking for. That's why he says to Yosef, Va'ani bevoi, when I came from Padan Aram, Mama died, I put her on the road. What he was telling him is, it all worked out the way it was supposed to. And when did he give him this message? When he was about to give a bracha to the children and to put 2 more children into Klal Yisrael, 2 more children of Yosef, of Rachel. And he gave Rachel 2 more kids, and he firmly established that he is now going to be taking his place with Leah in Ma'aras Machpelah. And there was no remorse. There was no, he wasn't looking at it saying, I'm sorry I did this. Please don't do as I do as I say. That's not what Yaakov was about. Yaakov was finishing Sefer Bereishis. And what he was saying is that in the future, when the Navi says to Rachel, Mini kolech mi bechi, stop crying. Wipe away your tears. Because v'shavu banim ligvulim, your children are coming back home again. It's all going to be perfect because you're Mama Rachel. Rachel in her lifetime, there is no indication that she lived with that this pain overtook her life. One could make the argument that Leah, with the crying eyes, Leah with the dudayim, that there was a desire to change her lot. There was a desire for something else, and always felt unfulfilled. I think that the powerful end of Sefer Bereishis, from this viewpoint, is that at the end of the day, we live lives, and we have to realize we will never fulfill all of our dreams and desires. We hope for things, and at some point we say, that's not going to happen. But so many other things are going to happen. And when we focus on the things that we have, not on the things that we never achieved, then there isn't tears. Mini kolech mi bechi. You don't have to be crying. You don't have to worry, because in the end, everything is working out perfectly the way it's meant to. What we have and what we were successful with is what we need to enjoy, and what we don't have, we need to continue to dream about, but to be comfortable with it staying in the realm of a dream.
I think.
Look at how, I'm sorry.
No, go.
Just the last point. Look at how Sefer Bereishis begins. Adam Rishon in the Garden of Eden. God says to him, you can eat anything you want. Every single piece that's here, you can have. Except that tree. And let's make the story really dramatic. Let's paint the story the way Chazal say it was. One of the opinions of Chazal is, what was that tree? Wheat. So imagine, God comes to Adam and he says to him, you see the peaches? You can have them. You see the persimmons? You can have them. You see the kumquats and the oranges and apples? You can have them all. As much as you want, whenever you want them. It's not like they're grown in greenhouses in Cuba. These things are going to be fresh all year round. They're going to be everything you want. The one thing you can't have is a stick of wheat. And Adam Arishan goes ballistic. What? You're taking away a stick of wheat from me? The story sounds outrageous. It sounds much better if it was a a fig. If it was an esrig, no. What was bothering Adam? It wasn't the fact that he couldn't eat wheat. It's the fact that he couldn't. That he was focusing on what he didn't have, as opposed to focusing on what all the blessings that he had in front of him.
And that's resolved at the end.
That's resolved at the end of Sefer Bereishis.
That's awesome. First of all, I love the Vart. It's beautiful understanding of the psukim. As you were saying it, I was like seeing these two ideas of being happy with what you have and everything works out at the end. But I think the way you tied it together at the end, and I think that's what you really have to unpack here, is that the antidote for being happy with what you have and not just being the sin of Adam of just because you can't, you're unhappy, which is a little bit like the Haman, the V'chozen and Shava, right? We see this over and over and over in Torah and Tanakh. And the antidote to that is realizing that everything's going to work out in the end. And the fascinating end is that not even the end of your life, it's the end of after your life, right? Is you can accomplish sometimes. And I think that's an awesome thing to unpack in our own lives, how we live, that when you realize that the Ribono Shel Olam is in charge and it's going to work out, then it makes right now a lot more relaxed and a lot more comfortable.
What I'm looking at right now, as difficult as some of that might be, I'm looking at the process of ultimately reaching perfection, which means that my contribution to the ultimate perfection, even in my life, my contribution now in this world is what's going to set the stage for what's going to come on later. I'll tell you two amazing things. On Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, we say that, there's the whole conversation with the Malachim and God, that, why don't we say Hallel? The question, I'm sorry, that everybody asks, why don't we say Hallel on Rosh Hashanah? So we say that the Sefer Mechayim v'Mesim Psuchim Lefonai, of the living and the dead are open in front of me, it's not an appropriate time to say Hallel. So a lot of Torah about that, because it's a little odd. What difference does it make, Chaim and Mesim, that you shouldn't say Hallel? And and what does it mean that the Sifrei Mesim are open in front of me? So the people that are alive that are going to die, that's the standard way of understanding with the three books that are open in front of me. But I think it's not. I think the Chavetz Chaim says that Sifrei Chaim and Sifrei Mesim means that the living are judged and the dead are judged also. And what are the dead judged on, isn't it? They haven't done much since they left the world. So what are they being judged on? How they're lying in the ground? It's like what
how their Matseva looks, right?
Yeah. Well, so what they're being judged on is that when you do something in this world, it doesn't end with your death. It's like throwing a stone into water, and there's a ripple effect. And as long as those ripples are still rippling, then you're responsible for that. L'tov u'l'ra. And therefore the Sifrei Mesim, you're being judged every year in Rosh Hashanah based on the original thing that you did and the kind of effects that it's continuing to have. Menashe did tshuva. The wicked Menashe, he did tshuva. Where is that tshuva recorded? Divrei Hayamim. Why isn't it recorded in the Navi, where it technically happened? Because Divrei Hayamim basically was written by Anshe Knesset Gedolah. It was written 150, 200 years after Menashe and after his tshuva, because for that whole time it was still rippling. And therefore, the story wasn't over yet. The wickedness that Menashe did with his idolatry lasted even beyond the destruction of the temple. After the destruction of the temple, there were people that were saying that had we been frummer with our Avodah Zarah, then the temple never would have been destroyed. The effects of this negative effect, this creeping effect of his negativity, the things that he did, kept going on. When it was done, now his tshuva could be accepted. Now we could talk about the fact that he did tshuva. I think that's a mind-blowing idea. That we have to recognize that what we're doing now, and what we're accomplishing here is there's an end to this, but that end might be way beyond our lives. But that doesn't make it that this is not then disappointing. This is the life and the choices and the things that I needed to do in order to be able to get it to where it's going to be in the end. And that ended. V'shavu banim l'gvulam.
So then there's two things there. First of all, Mommy was talking about this week, this fascinating phenomenon she was watching that a few weeks or maybe a month after Rabbi Sachs was nifter, Rabbi Jonathan Sachs, as that's all. So she then said now she sees like everybody's jumping on the bandwagon. But besides for perhaps the negative aspect, like we spoke about 2 weeks ago, that it's easier to make someone into a celebrity rabbi and to celebrity gadol once they're dead, which is a problem with us, right?
Yeah.
Or what was the
Achrei Mos Kedoshim Emor, 3 pashas, one after the other. And if you take it out of context, Achrei Mos, after the person dies, Kedoshim Emor. So we call them. Wow, they were so amazing.
So besides that, I told her that, right. And besides the negative, that's a more cynical look at it. Right. But the beautiful look at it is that, first of all, with Rabbi Sachs, he was recording for many years, this stuff that's been coming out about him that he himself recorded. It's not, things that they heard from him and now we're transcribing them, like this Rabbi Victor Miller stuff that we're still transcribing today, which is also beautiful, speaks to the beautiful part of it, but that we can actually still be nana from his godless and from the things he put into this world after he's not here. And that's a beautiful, like when you can understand that as a person, that you're going to affect others, even when you are not here, your world opens up and life opens up.
In any situation where we appreciate somebody, we seem to appreciate them more after they're dead than when they're alive. The truth is that if they hadn't lived the way they lived, we might not have appreciated them that way after they died. And that it doesn't mean that we didn't appreciate them while they were alive, but they had much more to teach us. And they couldn't teach us that while they were alive. That had to be a posthumous message. And therefore, their message of when they were alive was setting the stage of what was going to be happening later. And that's what allows a person to live comfortably with the things that they're doing. Look, there's always some guilt that I could have done more, and that's why I didn't accomplish certain things because I was lazy. Okay, that's like a whole nother story, and you're gonna have to deal with that. But talking about things where you made every effort to be able to do something, and it fell short, and it wasn't there. But it wasn't there now. But that doesn't mean whatever you needed to get out of that is not going to be there. Everything you did now was setting the stage for that.
Right, and then just to speak to the whole concept as a whole, that to put it into a little bit of like a box or a nutshell. So then what you're saying is that, and just to unpack it, we'll put it in a box, but the idea is that the way someone, a way that someone can be misameach bechalko and happy with what he has now is realizing that A, everything's going to work out, and B, what you're doing now may have effect much later, and not to be saddened by the fact that, I don't see any peiros, anything growing from the seeds I'm planting now, proverbially, but that what I'm doing now isn't producing anything, because it can and it will produce. If it's real seeds and it's really doing something, then it has to go through a process, and it may be years down the road. Yes.
There's a third thing, which is continually focusing on the things that you have accomplished.
Okay.
Stop worrying about. It's there. It's real. It's a presence in our lives. The things that we dreamed about that we're not seeing those dreams happen. And the older you get, and the less possible it is to fulfill some of those dreams, so then the more the bigger those become. But you can't focus on that. You have to focus on, look at all the things that I have in fact accomplished, and then I've in fact been able to be pile and to be able to set into this world that I can see with my own eyes. And the more that a person is able to focus on that, so then the happier they'll be.
Right. And there's a pasuk that speaks to that. They say maybe a little bit of a joke about it, but it's leiv chacham liyamin, right? And leiv ksil l'smol. So I think they say that those who look towards, like if you're opening a Gemara and you have something in front of you and you look towards your right, meaning all the things you've accomplished and all the pages you've accomplished, that's a chacham. But somebody who's just looking at where's the next two dots for those who learn Gemara, or where is the end of the Masechta, or where am I going? So then that's a little bit of exil, because you have to focus. The Chacham focuses on what he does have, and then he can be happier with that.
Right. It's very hard to make it through Shas when you look at it and you say,
I'm trying to make it through Shas.
I've got
right?
2,000 pages to go. But when you look at it, I told you I heard this at a Siyum, where a guy was like so proud of himself, of the amount of pages, and he put it all in terms of I've learned this amount of pages of Gemara, and put in this amount of time to be able to learn those pages. And he didn't look at it and saying, but I still have so much to go. He didn't say, and it seems like almost a mountain that I can't really climb. And he was looking at it, look at what I've done. 10 years ago, you would have said to me, you in 10 years are going to learn X amount of pages of Gemara.
No way.
It's not going to happen. So it's focusing on what you've done. Now, you focus too long on what you've done, you become a Balgaiva. But
correct.
We're not talking about that. But you have to appreciate. You have to appreciate the brachas that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is giving you in this world. You have to be able to appreciate them, and not look at what is chaser, but you have to look at what we have.
So the middle idea I just want to talk to for a second, that being happy with what you have, happiness and content is obviously the number one trigger topic, and it's an important topic to discuss, whether you're in Torah, whether you're in business, whether whether your focus is coming from any of these places. How am I happy with my accomplishments? The accomplishments can be anything. Your family, your business, your work, your hobbies, your Torah, all that is, how can I be happy with that? And when you realize, so the formula that we're giving here is actually it's difficult, but could it potentially be the answer, or just a way to deal with it? That if you I'm leaning towards the answer, that if you realize that life is so much bigger than you, and time is greater than your 120 years you're going to spend on this earth, and that things you do now may affect others in 200 years. So then you'll be more content with what you're doing now, because you're planting. It's a different type of work that you're doing. I think that's very hard to do. Easy said, hard to do. But I want to say that maybe that's the answer, and that's why we don't hear about it when you hear your motivational speeches and things, whether Torah or not. But you don't hear, you're gonna die, and you're gonna turn into worms. Don't worry so much about your accomplishments and reaping the kavod from your accomplishments here. Worry about really changing the world and really doing that. And you don't hear that in motivational speeches, because it's not motivational. It's hard, but it could be that sometimes the hardest things are the answers.
You know what the real answer is? Around the Shabbos table. The more you talk about it, the more you talk, not just droning over the same conversation, but the more you hit it from different angles, of focusing on what you have, focusing on the now, focusing on what you're engaged in, not what you're not engaged in, but what you haven't done, not what you don't have. The more you can dissect that, or unpack it, as you say, so then the more it becomes a reality in your life. You can't hear one shir about it. You can't hear one good shmooze about it, or have one good conversation about it. It's got to be around the Shabbos table. You got to hit it from every angle that you can hit it from, in order, because it's a huge thing. Our tendency, our natural tendency, is to see the bleak, is to see the negative, is to see what we don't have. That's a natural tendency, and that we have to break away from the natural tendency. That requires a tremendous amount of strength. And strength comes from listening to ideas. Because I have a certain approach to it. I use certain words, I use certain ideas to approach that. But you use different words and different mishalim and different, and as we talk about it, so then something is going to open me up. And I'm saying, not just you and I, but I'm saying the more that you talk about this issue, from all of its places in the Torah, from all of its places in Tanakh, you unpack it, and it has a very long lasting effect on a person.
Amazing. Yeah. And thank you for listening again. And okay, thank you for listening again to Around the Shabbos Table. And we hope that, you can take this conversation, like we're saying, just take the conversation to your table, to your family, and have it. Just as a review, we talked about being happy with what you have. And my father, the father, sourced it in the end, the culmination of Sefer Bereishis, and he tied the beginning of Bereishis to the end of Bereishis as this message of don't focus on what you can't have, focus on what you do have, and everything's going to work out in the end. And these are really important messages that we hope to bring to you, and we can unpack them more if that's what you want. I'm talking about feedback. Keep it coming, man. It always helps us. It helps us refine what we're doing and do it better. So we hope that you have a great Shabbos. As always, enjoy your reheated Chulent, and rock on.